Well, good morning and welcome to our Abuja studios. Well, we're quickly going to be digging into the report which you saw there, which was introducing the fact that the president has now, they haven't been, I believe that they might have been inaugurated by now, but the president was setting up a steering committee to ensure the implementation of the PIA, that's the Petroleum Industry Act, is now an act. I think we have to get used to saying PIA, no longer PIB. Well, the president has given them 12 months to implement that particular act and ensure that they're able to get the value proposition from that particular act. Well, to help look at issues around it, because there have been a number of reactions to it, a lot of people have welcomed it, some positively, others saying, well, this is going to affect us somewhat. It's going to impact us negatively. One of the people or one of the groups that have mentioned this is the Nigeria Governors Forum, saying all of the money is now going to be deducted. Looks like it's going to be depleting funds accruing to the Federation account. Now, we do not know whether all of this was taken into cognizance by the National Assembly when the bill was being enacted. Or there'll be questions as to where were the governors when this bill was being passed. But this morning we have a number of guests with us, which will have been introduced on your screen. But we have one right here in our studio. Honorable Musa Ada, beg your pardon, is a chairman House Committee on Petroleum Upstream. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you and good morning to everyone.
I'm sure it must have been a big deal for your committee that you were eventually able to help push this bill through the National Assembly and eventually to the desk of the president. And finally, the PIB has finally seen light of day as the PIA is now the Petroleum Industry Act. Can you describe the feeling among members of your committee?
Let me start by saying this. The feelings of the members of the committee is highly elated, not because of anything, but because of the onerous task that we have been saddled with over the years. People like us, like me in particular, who have been in the parliament from 2007 till date, and happened to be a member of the PIB then, and later got the opportunity to chair the Committee on Petroleum Upstream Matters. We have been facing challenges at any time the PIB was sent to the National Assembly by the president, successive presidents, about 4, from Obasanjo to Yar'Adua to President Goodluck Jonathan, and finally to President Muhammadu Buhari. And even President Muhammadu Buhari, this is the second time he is presenting it. And always there were rancor among members, sometimes with divides along geopolitical zones, ethnicity, sometimes even religion, which was most unfortunate. This time around, we became united unanimously, or with larger majority, and got to work together as one Nigerian members of parliament of a particular committee, and came up with a document that has now seen the light of the day. Like you have said, I like the choice of your word. There's no longer PIB, it's now PIA. It has become an act of the parliament assented by Mr. President. And it's now a working document that has provided frameworks for work in the petroleum industry. And all the concerns of both the local and international players within the industry have now raised to dust. And the hopes that the players in the industry have been giving us, that it will generate a lot of job opportunities, increase our wealth, is what we are now waiting to see. And I think it's a good thing for Nigeria. So one cannot imagine the spirit of joy by us.
It's a big deal for your committee.
It is impact.
Well, the PIB, beg your pardon, the PIA, I think, as I did say, it's going to take some getting used to keep saying the PIA, because we've said PIB for so long, as you rightly pointed out, for about 2 decades now, it's been the PIB. Now it's the PIA. It does make a number of provisions. The NNPC is supposed to become NNPC Limited. It's supposed to become NNPC Limited from 6 months from the president signing that particular, the president signing of the bill into law. And then there's also regulatory commissions. There's a regulatory commission to oversee upstream affairs, and there's a midstream and downstream authority to oversee what is happening midstream and downstream as well. There have been concerns about that why do we have two regulatory commissions? Why don't we have, or two regulatory bodies? Why don't we have a single regulatory body as does every other area that has been liberalized? For instance, they point to telecommunications to say there's only NCC to oversee telecommunications. There's only, what's that body can I remember now, that has just one regulatory commission. NERC, for instance, oversees all of the electricity concerns in the country. Why do we have to have two regulatory bodies? Do you know why the National Assembly opted for that?
Yes, it is not the National Assembly that opted to split it into upstream and midstream and downstream. It is the experts in the industry. And what they said, it is meant to ease means of governance, because it's a very wide, deep sector that requires most times instant approvals, instant permissions, or instant reprisals for those who violated the law. If you put it together to become one single agency with the usual bottlenecks of the bureaucracy, which we are all aware of, most especially in our country here, so it is better now you split it into that. Why? Because the upstream is essentially for upstream matters, which includes exploration, production of the crude and export and whatever there. Then the mid and downstream is about the pipelines and the marketing of the refined products, which we now mostly import. And hopefully with this act, we'll soon stop importing the refined products and we'll be able to even export if our refineries are working, because a lot of private hands are going to be involved. It is almost going to be liberalized. So for this reason, it is essentially meant to improve efficiency at the right time.
Do you think it could also become an encumbrance? When you look at the fact that, in abroad, for instance, or even just abroad, could be neighboring Ghana, sometimes the international oil companies, which have been major players, usually play upstream and sometimes midstream and downstream as well. In Nigeria, for a long time, it would seem that our IOCs have only been able to play upstream. Very rarely do they play downstream, and that they cite the fact that our market is not deregulated as the excuse for them not being involved downstream. Now, people are saying that oftentimes when they have to be involved downstream as well. The fact that we now have two regulatory bodies means that they will have to get a license from upstream, get a license from downstream, and that sometimes bureaucratic bottlenecks could be a hindrance rather than something that will make it efficient.
You have almost answered yourself, right, because you said there is a hindrance in the implementation. For example, now you can't compare Ghana with Nigerian petroleum industry. Ghana produces less than 200,000 barrels a day. Nigeria is producing almost about 200 million barrels per day because of the limitation by the OPEC. If there's no limitation, Nigeria have the capacity to produce about 2.5 to 3 million barrels per day. Notwithstanding, the number of international companies that are operating in Nigeria are not available in Ghana. So all this put together, and don't forget the mindset of some people. Now, for example, if Shell, Total, Mobil, or any of their categories apply for a particular permission or a waiver or anything of sort, and you now have your own local company and you have same request with them, I can guess, or we can guess, if the request reaches the table on time, the person working there may probably be intimidated by the name Shell or Shell, Ajib or Total, instead of to say Mr. Nwoko or Mr. Musa or Mr. Oluwale Oil Limited, something like that. There's that tendency. Generally, there's need to break that hindrance so that we can have like a smooth operation and efficiency. The most important thing there is the efficiency that we are looking for. Especially now we are in a sort of a transition period. People are not used to it. Prior to then, it is all handled by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, by the Department of Petroleum Resources, by PPRA, by Petroleum Equalization Fund. It's a number of agencies that are coming up together. DPR, for example, is going to be subsumed to become, or to metamorphose to become the Petroleum Regulatory Upstream Regulatory Commission with some other parts of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources and part of even NNPC. Similarly, the midstream and downstream regulatory authority is going to come from the Petroleum Equalization, the PPRA, and even part of NPC again. So it is easier to break it as such than to lampoon it into one single entity.
You know, I did cite Ghana because Ghana's downstream sector had been deregulated long before Nigeria's, and all these major players were already playing in Ghana's downstream sector before. I mean, none of them is still playing in Nigeria's downstream sector. I don't think any one of them currently is.
Yeah, quite correct.
Yeah, so let's quickly flip this to Lagos now for questions from my colleagues. Gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Mark. But we have a couple of other guests, as Mark mentioned that we had in the opening slide. Two of them are joining us virtually today. Peter Esele is former president, TUC, that's Trade Union Congress, and Pengasan, which is the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. He joins us along with Billy Gillis Harris, who is national president, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria, Petron. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Well, Mr. Esele, let me begin with you. This conversation around PIA has been on for a very, very long time. And well, the one that will probably, interest you more would be the fact that, wait a minute, what's going to happen to the staff of those working in the oil and gas industry in general? And the assurance given by the minister says, no one is going to lose a job and all of that. Are you appeased by that? Generally, maybe you want to give your first take about the PIA.
Well, first, let me thank you for having me. I don't think on the issue of PIA now, we've started from PIB. Let me give you a context. It started from OGIC, which is Oil and Gas Implementation Committee, to Petroleum Industry Bill, to Petroleum Industry Governance Bill, and finally, it's now PIA. First, and I think I will have to look at this law as a glass half full rather than half empty. There are challenges that is going to come through the implementation of this law, but it's better off that we have a law to talk about, which means I've always considered democracy to be work in progress. So we have a law to talk about, which means we are better off than where we were before in terms of what will happen in that sector. I think on the issue of workers losing their jobs or not, I think Pengas and Nupeng, they're on top of this. They have been following this from OGIC to PIB to PIGB and to PIA. Pengas and Nupeng were in all of this. So there are areas where they disagree with government, but I think it's not as difficult as we may look at it. But what are some of the areas of challenges? I heard the honorable member of the House of Representatives talking about bureaucratic bottleneck, about the upstream, midstream, downstream. I think that is bureaucracy. It's going to compound business. It's going to compound investment in the sense that what you have in the past was just Directorate of Petroleum Resources, which is DPRO. And we all know that if you want to do business in terms of investment, it's better for you to just go to a shop, one shop, and you get everything done. But what they are going to be facing, businesses, investors are going to be facing, is that they have to now have two shops. They have to confront two shops. And when you do that, that also means a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hindrance. He alluded to whether it's Shell or Mr. Oku. I don't think anybody what it sought in that sector will be intimidated.
Just a second, Mr. Esele. You're already going into some of the details we hope to take you on later on. But let me quickly bring in Mr. Gillis Harris for his opening comments as well. Well, operationalizing this law is something that's giving a number of people concern. Well, the reform has started. The change of name, first of all, is no longer PIB, it's PIA. It's an act, it's a law, it must be implemented. Implementation has also started with the president setting up that committee. For those of you who operate, especially in the private sector, how does it hit you?
Well, first of all, let me thank you all for having me this morning. It's a great day. Long story short, jinx broken. Over a decade of struggle to put the Petroleum Industry Bill into effect has snowballed, into where we are to be an act. Kudos to the President, to the Honorable Minister of State, to the GMD and NPC, to the director, DPRO, and everyone stakeholder who has contributed to make sure it was, including my humble self. I started it when I was president of the State Chamber of Commerce in Rivers State. So, operationalizing the act, I believe, is a matter of focus and patriotism for Nigeria and Nigerians. The bill itself cannot be perfect and will not be perfect at any time. But it's going to be work in progress that's going to eventually ensure that the industry is properly regulated and provisioned for the growth of the economy of Nigeria. For us in the private sector, especially those who have retail outlets, that's the most critical, last mile in the industry. Whatever you are doing in the upstream and the midstream, it will still come down to the downstream. And when it gets to the downstream, which is why even the business is started, we will give the best service orientation to that, because this is where the Nigerian, the market woman, the minister, the president, everybody, this is where we meet. I do think that it's a very good thing that the president has signed this into an act, and we in the private sector will need to interface, especially with the implementation committee that has been set up. We need to interface very, very frontally with them, and understand the takeaways. But right away, I think we are ready to work with the act, because the immediate thing we are seeing there is that we will not be hamstrung by petroleum pricing pegged by the PIPRA or any other agency. But there will be the opportunity for us to be able to determine how this business will be done efficiently, so that price does not hinder the service provision that a patron especially will be bringing to the industry.
So you've raised a major issue. You've raised a major issue, but let me get you to respond to some of the conversations we had earlier with the honorable member. In fact, Mr. Esele also referenced it, the separation, as it were. So you have the upstream commission, and then you have the midstream and downstream authority, as it were. You're a player in the downstream. So do you see that working well? I know the midstream has been added into the conversation, but do you see that working well, the separation, as it were, as opposed to having a single body? Some will say we had a DPR. The question is, was DPR working as it ought to? So with this new provision in the law, do you think it smoothens operations across those levels?
Well, first of all, I'm not new to all the levels of the business. I also operate in the upstream area. The midstream, we're actually there, because we also provide the fiscal services. The reality is that DPR itself has been overwhelmed by the size of requests. And I really salute, the leadership of DPR since it was formed from just an inspectorate division to today. Especially the current leadership is really, really doing their best to make sure that a DPR becomes a center for business. It becomes a business enhancer. It becomes an institution that encourages business, regardless of some of the prices and charges that are coming up here and there. Of course, we engage them and we try to let them know some of these things may not be difficult for us. Well, now they're going to pass that to an authority. In my opinion, it is best for the commission to be saddled with the total responsibility of the upstream and focus with it. The bureaucracy that is anticipated may not even be there, because there'll be speed in application, speed in reviews, speed in approvals from all upstream activities. And then, of course, when it gets to the midstream and downstream, which is mostly gas pipelines, refined products, it is also better for a smaller, agency, authority, if you call it, to be able to interface with us, because then we can easily go up, apply for a license to run a retail outlet, for instance, or a gas processing plant, or a gas sales retail outlet, and be able to get that done. so that it doesn't also get mixed up with all the upstream operations of what was the DPR before. And then, of course, NNPC is going to be a private sector company now, just like my company, just like Jennifer and Bill Corporation, for instance. It will be the same thing. It's just that they're going to be much bigger because they're coming with more assets. They already have the patronage of the government. But one of the beauty of this is that there'll be no sacred cows and everybody will be playing on a level playing field. The fact that importation of product is anticipated to be stopped is quite good. We advocate for that. We are insisting now that the midstream and downstream sectors are different, that at least they should look forward to encouraging over 1,000 modular refineries, set up across the country. And that in itself is going to be able to help. Now, when that comes, you can see that the midstream and the downstream authorities will attend to that faster than clogging it with the upstream, operations. So,
okay, Mr. Gilisari,
I salute. Yes.
I'm glad you as an operator, as you said, in the upstream, downstream, and a little bit in the midstream, you have at least shared from your insights, your experience across those levels. So let me take this back to Mr. Sele, because for him, he thinks separating these operations might create bureaucracies. And you started off earlier, Mr. Sele. So he seems to agree with Honorable Ada in our Abuja studio that this is good for the petroleum sector to reduce the bureaucracies, but you don't think that?
Well, I don't think so. I'm happy that he says he had just expressed himself that he's an operator, but we are going to be here and see how that works. I'll take you back down memory lane, and if you look at DPRO, what was the problem of DPRO? If DPRO wasn't functioning the way we expect DPRO to function, it's just the fact that DPRO didn't have the capacity. They were not properly funded. There was no proper training. I'll give you an example. If DPRO is to carry out, let's say, a check on Shell, for example, or any of the IOCs, DPRO will require logistics from, when I use the word logistics, I know there are so many interpretations to logistics right now in Nigeria. I'm actually talking about the actual logistics. They will require an helicopter from one of the IOCs. So if you want to regulate somebody, you can pay a surprise visit. So DPRO doesn't have the capacity to do that. So a lot of these things were playing out. So what we need to do, what I think we should have done is, you set timelines. Okay, if somebody apply for a license, for example, that the person must get a response or it must be closed out within 45 days. That would help. Everybody knows that, okay, I'm coming here to apply for XYZ, so in 45 days, I get it. It's just like similar thing that we've been going through in our country. We have issues with police, we create the FCC. We have issues with this, we create other agencies. But if we had looked at it, because one of the reasons why they actually went ahead to create upstream, midstream, and downstream is that there are people who felt that, DPRO was not living up to expectation. So if you feel that way, then why don't we look at, okay, what is the problem? Why is DPRO not living up to expectation, so that we go ahead and fix it? Generally, I think having PIB to be PIA, I think it's a welcome development. I support it, but we have the discipline? I've always said our problem in this country is not law. Our problem in this country is not policies. Our problem in this country is the structure and the discipline to follow through.
It's interesting, Mr. Sele, that you mention laws and the agencies. You talk about the DPR, for instance. The DPR is just one of 13 existing regulatory agencies, all made from 12 different laws, in our nation, all operating within the governing, so to speak, the petroleum sector, the energy sector, before the advent of this PIA. Now, for instance, if we take a look, and I hope we'll be able to see it, okay, these are some of the regulatory authorities that you can see on the screen there. Nesria, is born out of FEPA and a number of others like that, the National Oil Spill Detection, and on and on and on and on and on. These agencies, there are 13 of them. Now, I'm just wondering, if we didn't really get sufficient action from these agencies, it will seem, because 13 agencies, one sector, and we still had all of the challenges that we have. How optimistic are you that in administering this PIA, well, at least there is a segment on administration in the law, we will get, desired results?
It's a tough one, because if I'm to go back, as Fela would say, water kills somebody, but that does not mean you will not drink water. So we have to have hope, because what we have now is we have to lean on that hope that, okay, let's hope that we'll get things right.
All right, well, just a second, Mr. Sele. Please don't forget your thought. Hope. But how significant would that be in implementing some of these things? We'll take that on when we return from this break. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Sele, you are talking about hope. 13 agencies governing the petroleum sector before the advent of PIA, and we had what we had. And you say we should have hope. Why?
Why I'm saying we should have hope on this is about, you have to look at the people driving the process. When you look at someone like the GMD, for example, from day one, the GMD's call was that he was going to do everything to make sure this PI bill is passed. And if you look at the fact that, go back to the history of NNPC, you find out that you virtually have GMD every other year, if you go back to its history. So one of the things that you need to carry out anything is you have to be able to know the person who is driving the process has the capacity. So if we put round pegs in round holes, then I will be very, very hopeful. And then the politicians should also mind their politics and take politics out of business, allow technocrats do what they are there to do. Because when you have an example, most of the challenges we are talking about is strictly politics. Politics of interference in what an NPC is doing. So let's hope now that if an NPC becomes a limited liability company, let's hope that will get better. Even though I have also had reservations that why do you have to put 60% in Ministry of Finance? Because that's what gives room for politics to be involved. And that is why you heard me when I said from day one, is I'm looking at this law as half a glass half full. Now, if you have people who are running the business, and these are technocrats who are competent, who know what they are doing, then we'll be very hopeful. But if you look at the entire 30 agencies that you just brought on board, you are going to find out that they've not been able to do what they are supposed to do because of politics, whereby you have to bring somebody. It's just as if you are bringing a carpenter to give somebody an injection. So the role of a doctor must be played by those who are trained to be a doctor. So what I'm advising is that while we try to implement this act, we must ensure that the right people are in the right places. The governor of CBN has a tenure. Whoever is in NCC has a tenure, but the GMD of NNPC does not have a tenure. The reason why is that they don't want a GMD of an NPC to have a tenure. The GMD can come to the table now and tell you this is the plan for the next 5 years, and they wake up tomorrow and it's announced on television that the GMD has been removed. So when you have things like that, you also now have policy inconsistency, and you also have people who cannot now drive the process. So my own disappointment with the act is that I also expect that the the GMD of NNPC also be given a tenure so that he can put his plan together and say, okay, this is the process, this is where we are going.
I think so far, a lot of people have expressed optimism, and they've pointed out a few, issues they have as well, just as you have done. And I think it's quite important, really, so we can project to the future, see the hurdles and potholes that we might need to avoid. So let me take this back to Mr. Gillis Harry and just explore something he mentioned earlier about competitive prices at the downstream, deregulation, and what have you. And I recall that some months back, Nupengasan, that's a combination of Nupeng and Pengasan, raised, concerns about fuel import license for refiners in the country. And for them, they said that this provision will stifle price competition and leave pricing to be solely dictated by a few local refiners. Just as you said, you operate a little bit in the midstream where we have, local refiners. Do you have concerns? Do you share these concerns? What do you see playing out?
Well, I share those concerns very deeply. I think that we should advocate for liberal, participation in the business. We should not allow we should not allow just only few people that are so mentioned to be responsible to import petroleum products of any kind. Associations like ours that is representing over 39,000 retail outlets in the country and about 15,000 dumps should also be given the freedom to be able to import. And most of our members have the capacity to do so. So I think that we need to make sure that there is a level playing field at all levels. NNPC Limited.
With that, if you don't mind me butting in, Mr. Gillis Harris, is that there are concerns among some sectors that it would automatically and naturally raise the pump price of fuel. And, well, while some are, confident or at least hopeful that the prices will come down over time, the concern is that the immediate impact will only worsen the economic realities of the average Nigerian.
Well, I do not disagree with anybody for having such concerns. What I'm trying to say is simple. If petroleum pricing is allowed to fall within the control of market forces, it will be much better for Nigeria. It will be much better for the economy. However, for every, adverse economic...
Seeing Mr. Gillis Harris, my apologies. Are you suggesting that there is going to be a hike in fuel prices? That if that happens, the fuel prices will increase?
Well, in reality, it's not going to be a yes or no answer, Mr. Chevrolet. Let's look at it that I imported 1 liter of petroleum product for 500 naira. Would you advise that I should sell it for 499? You certainly will not. So the price that is invested in ensuring that you have petroleum products in your retail outlets to run the economy, to drive the economy, because that's the source of the energy. We should be, priced fairly. The only issue here is that it should not be done arbitrarily to the disadvantage of Nigerians. And the other point I wanted to make is that if we envisage that there's going to be a price hike in petroleum product, there should be an economic, engineering that should be able to provide for some sort of cushion in ensuring that whatever prices that are impacted, whatever adverse economic impact that's coming in because of price increase of any kind should be, mitigated by some other, like food, like transportation, and so on and so forth. But the fact that NNPC has been bearing the responsibility to fritter away about 120 billion, naira, daily, monthly, weekly, it's not helping the economy in any way.
Okay. All right, Mr. Gillis Harris. Well, that's noted. Let's take this to Honorable Ada now, who's been having this conversation with us in Abuja as well. Well, Honorable, you've been listening. I'm pretty sure you would want to respond to one or two things. But what I would like to ask you before handing back over to Maokwe is, there are 12 laws that govern the petroleum sector before now. 12 laws. And one of the provisions of the PIA is that a licensee who engages in upstream operations will have to submit to the commission approval of an environmental management plan. One of those 13 laws is an environmental assessment plan. Environmental impact assessment plan that is supposed to be submitted before the company begins work. What happens to all those 13 laws? Are they all subsumed in PIA?
Yes. Every other law that you have mentioned amongst those laws have now subsumed. In fact, anything relating to petroleum industry have now been, I don't want to use the word abrogated, it's been now replaced by the PIA. You have various laws from the Petroleum Act to any other law that exists before the signing of the Petroleum Industry Act is now subsumed by the Petroleum Industry Act. It's a single law that it subsudes all others. And that is important. And every other law, whenever you have even an amendment, provided that amendment is not on a particular clause. If it is general and holistic, then it's subsumed any other existing law that comes in with it.
Well, the
All right,
issue
well-
now is because some of the...
Go ahead, Markwe.
I don't know, Ayo, did you have a follow-up for that?
No, Markwe, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, some of the laws there as listed, some of them fall under the Ministry of Environment, others are directly under the Ministry of Petroleum. Looking at the fact that they are under different ministries, will we see some of them now being taken over by the Ministry of Petroleum, or would they be under the regulatory commissions as, well, commission and authority as being set up by this particular law? Is it very clear?
What I've told you in private, I'll tell you publicly here. It is not going to be, there wouldn't be any overlapping there. For example, now, for those in business, when you want to register a business through tendering, you are required to provide certain parameters, certain requirements. For example, PMCOM certification, NSITF, even EFCC clearance. You go to various agencies and obtain those. Then now you come and have your company profile before you tender to qualify for any technical tendering. So I want to believe equally here, if you are expected to bring an environmental impact assessment and that agency exists and the agency is under a particular ministry, for example, Ministry of Environment, now you go there and obtain the environmental impact assessment and give it to the Petroleum Upstream Commission or to the Regulatory Commission, whatever it falls within. And I'm sure there they will also put an office that will verify whatever is brought to you. And as time goes on, we are now in a transition. I believe as time goes on, they will be able to have a unit that will take care of that. And they will employ experts within the area to come and work for them. I hope that what will happen. And law is ongoing, it is subject to amendment. At any time, if a lacuna is observed, somebody either from the parliament or from the executive side can bring an amendment to particular lacuna to remove it in order to strengthen and smoothen the operations of that act.
Indeed. Well, the implementation committee has already been inaugurated and they are already set into work. They have 12 months to ensure that this works. But, some people just were wondering how, if under the law, there are already provisions, penalties for spillage and things of the sort. And oftentimes it is the Ministry of Environment, NESRIA that looks at this kinds of matters. Are those bodies going to be incorporated somewhat into the Ministry of Petroleum now, or are they going to be under the major regulatory commissions as set out by the law?
Let me say this to you. Just yesterday, I was discussing with an expert in the industry who also happened to be a member of the implementation committee. I read this question to him. In the structure provided by the Petroleum Industry Act, you are going to have 2 EDs in each of both the commission and the authority. I now ask him, what is going to be the nomenclature? Petroleum Upstream Regulatory Commission is supposed to be a commission. And if you have a structure that says executive directors, it means you are going to have a DG or you are going to have an MD, which I don't think so. All the commissions have executive vice chairman or they have executive chairman. So in this circumstance, there's need to look at that. And what he agreed with me, yes, there's need to look into that and come up with a structure that is most applicable, even if it is only for the nomenclature of title. It's important because you cannot have an executive director under an executive chairman. For example, the NCC now, they have executive vice chairman and executive commissioners. So I opine to him that you need to come up with this. If you are going to have executive directors, then it means you are going to have an MD, and you can't have an MD in a commission. We don't have any commission in Nigeria that is the headship is titled the MD or the DG. So these are some of the things that we are just raising here. As I said, the implementation committee is their own is to go and look at what are the possible challenges, what are the lacunas left by the law, and they will be able to advise the president to come up with an amendment to rectify such anomalies. And that can be done within a very short time. That's not going to hinder the passage of the act or the implementation of the act.
There have been assurances from this particular passage of the PIA that there will be no jobs lost. that somehow all of the agencies, even including Petroleum Equalization Fund and a number of other agencies, Triple PRA and all of that, will be subsumed under the new companies that have been created and the regulatory bodies that have been created by the Petroleum Industry Act. However, these are the 13 bodies that would somehow lose relevance or will go into extinction somewhat. Are they also covered by this assurance that no jobs will be lost?
Certainly. They are not losing relevance. It's just moving from where they are to where they will fit better. For example, now, if the PPRA and the Petroleum Equalization and some part of the NNPC, for example, maybe the Petroleum Product Marketing Company, are going to come together, still the work remains. It is always a structure there. And that may be for the purpose of putting everything in one shop and reducing democratic bottlenecks and at the same time reducing the overhead cost.
Aren't we being political by saying that no jobs will be lost? I mean, because there'll be questions about efficiency. If what we're also trying to be is efficient and have and streamline everything, isn't it political for us to say that, no, it is, we're going to be efficient, but nobody's going to lose their work?
There shouldn't be any job loss or any job cut. Why? Because as it exists now, there's no overlapping in their businesses. What Petroleum Equalization does not interfere with what PPRA or what PPMC does. So it's a matter of you are having everything under one roof, but with various line officers and desk officers. If, for example, whichever among the three agencies that subsume to become Petroleum Regulatory Authority, whatever comes there, the person doing price regulation in the PRA with hitherto will now come to the regulatory authority to do the same line job that he has been doing there. The person who's doing the bridging issue in the Petroleum Equalization Fund will also do the bridging aspect of his job. And whoever comes from, if there's need for the environmental impact assessment necessary to be established in that office, whoever comes from the agency he so belong now will come and do exactly that particular job that he's doing. So there should be no fear of job cut, and there will be no reason for any job loss.
And the reason why I'm asking this, because as time goes on, we know that, excuse me, in the industry, we're expecting that the regulation will happen. And part of what will, an entire agency ensures that right now costs in the south are costs in the north, are costs in the east, and costs in the west at the same, especially for PMS. That's supposed to be the job of PEF, Petroleum Equalization Fund. When the regulation does happen, do you think that there will still be a need for that?
Of course, there would be a need for that. And if there's the regulation, it is my choice as a marketer to bring my product in Lagos and decide to sell it in Lagos. Or it's my choice to bring my product in Lagos and decide to take it any other part of the country and decide the price I want to sell. If I'm making a profit of 2 naira in Lagos, and I think if I take it elsewhere because of transportation, the margin will be 1 naira. It's my choice to do that. Until now, don't forget, most of productions of consumables takes place in Lagos. And I don't think the prices of, let's say, Dangote sugar or let's say Labour Brothers Lipton tea, the difference is not several between how you buy a packet of Lipton in Lagos and how you buy it in Kano or you buy it in Akwa Ibom. So that is already there. So it's governed by market mechanism.
Indeed. So if that is the situation, do you think that, when we say that nobody's going to lose their job, do you think on the long run, maybe now, no one will, but on the long run, do you think that job losses will be inevitable?
We shouldn't always preempt the goodwill that is provided in our law. We shall even expect by that time there will be more jobs because what the act, the way we are convinced and it was marketed to the members of the parliament and Nigerian public as well, that as it was before, it is militating against the capacity of Nigeria to produce more oil reserve. And now with this, the oil reserve will be grown, and as such, the production will also increase. And when you grow your reserve and you have more production capacity, it means you need more hands to come and work for you. So with that, I don't think there's going to be any challenge, and we should be hopeful. The Act clearly said that it is going to expand and open the business environment for more investors, local and international, should come. And when you have more investors in a particular sector, that means you need more hands to work for you.
Let me quickly flip this to my colleague, Kayode. He has a question for you.
Well, thanks, Mark. Honorable Ada, it's interesting you mentioned states. You referenced some states. And you may have come across reports that governors were not quite happy with some sections of this law that we're discussing. And in fact, the report says that they actually were trying to, liaise sort of with the presidency and the National Assembly to take another look at those sections just before the law was assented to. And the thinking was that some sections favored the federal government over state governments, as it were. And of course, this has to do about monies, the federation accounts, which is a big deal, by the way, and I'm sure you understand that. You have earlier said that all stakeholders were carried along. To what extent did that involve state governors specifically?
I have missed the earlier part of your question because the volume of my hearing aid here is very low. I just had the last one. If you can come again, please,
No
it
problem.
will help, or I will respond from where I had you.
Okay, let me just take the earlier part again. I referenced reports saying that state governors were not quite happy with some sections of the law, which they reportedly said favored the federal government over state governments in terms of allocations from federation account, what the NNPC will be doing, how they probably don't have stakes in the NNPC and the rest. And I recall that you earlier said that all stakeholders were carried along. So I'm wondering, to what extent did that involve state governors? And indeed, do you think those sections favor the federal government over state governments, at least some sections in the law?
First of all, let me say this. What I mean by all stakeholders were carried along, don't forget, in the process of enactment of any bill to become a law, there's what is called a public hearing, whereby members of the public, regardless of their position, regardless of their status, regardless of wherever they are allowed, they are invited to come and attend the public hearing and make input through memorandum or through oral presentation at that public hearing. So in this regard, I wouldn't want to believe that the governors were not aware when the public hearings took place. And this public hearing took place in many places at the zonal levels. When I say zonal, I mean geopolitical zones, and also in Abuja here. And it didn't last only one day. It takes about 3 days. And it was widely advertised through the electronic and print media. And don't forget, we are all from our various units. I don't think at the time this act was being processed, members of state caucuses did not inform their governor that this bill is before us and we are working on it. And the governor may not have given them their own input, whether it is against or for. Now that this thing has already been passed into, it has become an act, I don't think it should be an issue of anybody saying he has been left behind or part of his responsibility is taken away from him. No. And like I said earlier, the law is not always close-ended. It's open-ended. At any time anybody feel agitated, he have any input to add, or he has something that should be looked into with
I understand. Quickly, Honorable Ada.
Exempt it from the process, he can always make an amendment.
Okay, quickly, just to sort out that area, to what extent then does this law carry states along? To what extent are states going to be participating in this law when it is implemented?
When you say to what extent the states are going to be carried along, I am a bit confused. This is a law enacted for totality of Nigeria. And it's a law that is targeting the business environment of a particular sector within the national economy of the country. So this is not a political act. It is an act that is essentially, I don't want to somehow call it professional or technical. It's a law that is meant to regulate the petroleum industry. If the state have interest to participate in the petroleum business, they are free to come and join, and as such, it affects them. But generally, it is a law for the whole entire country, and in fact, even global, because anybody from another country coming to operate in Nigeria is going to be governed by that law, which they have been saying prior to now that it militates against their coming, that they have fears, that they don't have a working law that protects their investments.
Well,
Are we on?
Honorable, I'm pretty sure
Can you
that
hear
the
me?
states themselves will be happy to take this on with you subsequently. But let me take this to Mr. Esele. I noticed that while Honorable was responding to some of the questions raised along the line of job loss from those 13 agencies, it drew a laugh from you and Mr. Gillis Harris. I was wondering why.
Well, first, I will still commend the National Assembly for giving us an act. And the National Assembly also, the Honorable made reference to not losing the goodwill. And I'll commend the President too for doing that. But when you say not losing the goodwill, I think it's also very good to make people to be prepared for what is coming. The government, what they should do is to educate and inform the people. That is what the union is all about. That's why I'm not afraid of what Nupeng and Pengasin, because I know that Nupeng and Pengasin are already anticipating what is coming. Now, if you deregulate totally, PEF will be history. You know what PEF is doing. PEF is doing the bridging. Except you are going to say you will do whatever, no matter the English they are going to use. You will rationalize staff. But in the medium term, in the short term, yes, nobody is going to go. But in the medium to long term, you are going to rationalize staff. You are going to slim down. So it's better for people to know what is coming and they prepare for it. And he also, Billy was being very. I know him a lot. We've had meetings even when I was running the union. And Billy was being very diplomatic there. Billy himself knows that when the regulation comes, prices are going to increase. There is nobody should beat around the bush. And one of the reasons why prices will increase, somebody will tell me that prices will also go down. I would say you have to factor in the fact that crude oil is bought in dollars and sold in naira. So before you say prices are going to go down, then you must have naira and dollar parity. And since I was born, I've never seen naira and dollar having parity. Instead, it's always been the dollar going higher and higher. So
it's very sad, that what you just said, Mr. Esele, is quite sad indeed. But I remember I was born at the time when the naira was stronger than the pound. But I mean, we'll come. That's another day, another conversation for another day altogether. Well, let's also have your last take on all of this conversation, Mr. Gillis Harris, especially in the light of the fact that this has to be operationalized. And it's pretty much saying the petroleum sector is now squarely in the hands of the private sector. Even the NNPC will be a private sector participant.
Well, I would say kudos to Nigeria, because there is no business that is undertaken by the private sector that is not successful. Most of us started business with nothing, and today we're where we are. So private sector coming into the full bray of this business is going to benefit Nigerians. Let me say, without a shadow of doubt, that deregulation will be the order of the day, because there's no way we are going to be running this subsidy regime to the detriment of the growth of the Nigerian economy.
Well, Mr. Gillis Harris,
my last word is Channel TV, keep informing Nigerians about the benefits of not just the regulation, but the PIA that has been signed into law now. There are so many takeaways from there that we need to discuss, that we need to analyze. And I think this is the way Nigeria will go. We've started with this. We'll go
and that is why we are also remaining on this conversation, and for which reason we had you. But we have to thank you both for being a part of our conversation this morning. Billy Gillis Harris is National President, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners of Nigeria, Petron, as well as Peter Esele, former President, TUC, and Pegasus. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time on the program today.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
All right, Malqua, it's over to you.
You have an opportunity to have 30 seconds to say your last words on the PIA.
My plea is to Nigerians to see it in the good light, that it has come with goodwill, and it's something that we desired for a very long time. It has come, and we should all embrace it and try to understand how it is going to work, and like one of the speakers just said, you, the journalists, print and media and social media, of course, please try to educate people, enlighten them to understand properly what this act is all about. And I want to assure you it is the best thing that have ever happened to Nigeria in the recent history in the democratic journey. It is going to grow our economy, it is going to liberalize, it's going to create more job opportunities, and we are going to be happier and easier in getting our energy demands. Well,
Honorable Musa Ada, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning. He's the Chairman House Committee on Petroleum Upstream and also a member of the APC representing Gada Goronyo Federal Constituency in Sokoto State.